Before I sentence you, I'd like to say a few words about your arrest record. What the hell?
Yo, the sign is real simple, B. It says wrap it up. Wrap that shit up, B.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Man, you want some too? You better wrap it up.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and it's time for the first real wrap-up video that I'm going to do on the channel. And this is something that you should probably see every Sunday. Normally, it's going to be with my good friend Nalo, but I think he's moving or something this weekend. He wasn't able to make it, but here to talk with me about the X-Men Fantastic Four four-part miniseries from Chip Zdarsky and the Dodsons is my good friend Perch.
Hey there, how you doing?
I am doing excellent. You're a pretty good ringer, if I must say so myself. And I do want to say this to the viewers before we get started. If you are here and you haven't subscribed to the channel, like, what are you waiting for? It's time to subscribe to Thinking Critical YouTube. And when you're done with that, there's a link in the video description. And at the last 30 seconds, there's also going to be a big icon where you can go to Perch's channel, Comics by Perch, and you can subscribe there as well. I'm telling you, you are not going to regret it. You're going to get the best comic book YouTube content available.
We try and do a good job. Thank you very much. And I think we're trying to bring some good insight and information out there and just be some nice voices you guys can depend on. So it's always great to talk to you. And this is going to be a fun issue to get into.
Exactly, because I think most people know this. At Marvel Comics, I think Chip Zdarsky is the very best writer. I like Donny Cates a lot. I think he's just obviously he sells better, but I think as far as writing quality, I just think Zdarsky's got everything firing on all cylinders right now. Big fan of the Dodson. So this was something I was really excited for when they announced the four-part miniseries in Dawn of X. It felt like something that needed to be addressed, obviously with the initial confrontation between the Fantastic Four and Cyclops, kind of got everything going in the House of X. They're finally addressing it here. Of course, we kind of figured that Franklin Richards was going to play a big part in this, obviously being probably the most powerful mutant in the world, potentially. And I think that's exactly what we got.
Yeah, we did. And I think I'm with you with Zdarsky. The skill that he has is he's able to tell new stories that feel classic. They feel true to the characters. He's able to pick up those kind of beats and do a lot of things that really fit what's going on in comics. So I was looking forward to this. I was a big fan of the original back in the 80s. It was one of the better limited series that Marvel did with a lot of kind of depth. And this series did deliver in the standpoint that it definitely gives you the feelings. It reminds you of that old series.
So let's talk about the Dodson's art. Obviously, Terry and Rachel Dodson with Laura Martin on the colors. And Laura Martin's obviously one of the best colorists in the entire industry. I like the art. I like their style. It's a little bit more cartoony, but I think it certainly fits in with the characters that we have here. But there are a few issues here and there where, like, there's no details in faces. And you were saying that, based on the line weight, you think there was some alterations made to the art at some points?
Yeah, you see it in the second issue and the fourth issue, and a lot in the fourth, where something is just going on that's a little strange about here. I don't know exactly where, but if you look at the line art of the characters, at some point it's very thin, and others it looks like the art was actually scaled up, where they drew at a smaller rate and then they increase the size. You see parts where the borders just look like they're rough, or it's been expanded. It's if you've ever worked in Photoshop or arts tool and you move things, you increase the size of stuff, it loses some of its smooth line. There's just areas that look a little strange, and the Dodsons are great, great creators, great artists, and so and you're right on the coloring, everything, but you occasionally
Do you think it could be that there was a second inker that's attributed to working with the Dodsons in these? That maybe there was another inker on those pages?
An inker, or maybe something went wrong, or maybe it was drawn in digital and the coloring was applied in a strange way. There's just something off, and you see it in a couple of panels. Again, it's not catastrophic. Still, it's a beautiful looking comic, but you'll notice it with Magneto and in the final scene in issue 4, where they come over for dinner and Charles and Magneto show up at Reed's house, and you just see some of the faces get very strange, some of the bodies get strange, and the art gets really rough, like it was something went wrong. So I'm curious what happened there, but on the whole, yeah, it's a beautiful book. Just a few panels here and there look a little strange.
Now, you do dabble in the comic book arts. I do not. but basically line weight, for those who don't know, I'm sure most of our viewers do know, but the reason that they're important is they kind of add perspective or depth to the image, correct?
Yeah, I mean, yes, and it's the style of it can help the characters pop from the foreground to the background. There's a bunch of different ways it can be used, and I think the Dodsons in general have this very crisp style that's theirs. I mean, it's distinctive. If you look at it on a page, you immediately know who's drawing it, and part of it is how they do their line weight, how they do their outlining of their characters, how they just kind of the expressions. They're very distinctive as artists. So always great to see them on the page. It just feels here and there that there's a few kind of odd moments in how the art was produced. But that is, all things considered, nothing to complain too heavily about.
So I do want to talk about kind of how the art applies to this story. There is some confusion here because when we look at the story or look at the art, Kate Pryde plays a very big part in this story, but it's not the Kate Pryde that we are seeing in Marauders, had the broken nose, had the knuckle tattoos, that was drunk 24/7. This very much looks like the old Kitty Pryde that we would have gotten from the past X-Men comic books. Do you think that this was an intentional part on the Dodson's part? Maybe they liked that character, they didn't want to change the way that they drew her, or do you think maybe this is an indication that this happens maybe after Kate Pryde is resurrected? We know she died recently. After the resurrection portion on this story, maybe this happens a little bit in the future, because it always confused me when I read this story.
I don't know. So I think based on what at least we're hearing is going to come from Ten of Swords, and Kate Pryde is not resurrected yet in the X-Men books. So they're going to go right into Ten of Swords with her dead or missing at any rate. I have a hard time believing this series happens after that. So therefore, I think it has to happen before. And so then it doesn't fit with continuity very well. I mean, she doesn't have the tabs. Maybe this is happening kind of immediately, kind of before a lot of the Dawn of X titles. I don't know. It doesn't all line up well. And you see bits, Franklin toward the end, he's on Krakoa. I was doing the same thing. I was trying to figure out exactly where this series all fit in, and it just doesn't all line up, no matter how you look at it, including to the Fantastic Four, by the way, either. If you try and then bring their continuity into the mix, it also makes no sense. So I mean, it's a classic version of Kitty. They had to use her this way, I think, because Zdarsky wanted to tie into the relationship with Franklin and Kitty that was established in the first series. Makes sense. So I think that was great, but I don't know where this, I mean, from the Beast, for everything, a lot of characters do not fit. So I don't know where this lands.
I'm glad you brought up the relationship, or the implied relationship between Kate Pryde and Franklin Richards in this one. And, it's obvious that Kate Pryde is at least 21 years old in the Dawn of X series. She's drunk all the time. She's going into bars. She's getting knuckle tats while she's sailing the high seas. Franklin Richards is clearly 15 or 16 years old. It kind of creeped me out a little bit. Like, why is she using like her feminine wiles on a teenager? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe playing to if we're talking about moral compromising moments, I think this whole series has a bunch of them. It ends that way for sure. But I mean, the Franklin and Kitty relationship, it really, I mean, you have to have gone back and read the first limited series back in the 80s. It was very much Franklin and Kitty formed this friendship, and he was much younger then, I think under 10. And I mean, that whole series ends with Kitty Pryde, who's healing because she had been severely wounded by the Mutant Massacre events, and she's going to dance with Franklin when she's all better. So it's kind of this, not quite big sister little brother kind of relationship, but somewhat. So I got a lot of that feel in this book, but every now and then it did kind of wonder, especially with the tactics that they were encouraging Kate Pryde to use, that it's like, go flirt with him. It's like, well, I think they've got more of a sister-brother relationship, but anyway, and she kind of references that of that she doesn't want to manipulate her friend, and so I mean it's all there, but there was some moments that were kind of a bit odd. I agree.
So we need to go back to the beginning just to kind of talk about the conflict in the story between the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. Obviously, the most important resource on Krakoa are Omega level mutants. Franklin Richards is potentially the most powerful Omega level mutant, in the world. the Fantastic Four, obviously, they know that their son is a mutant. They don't want him to go to Krakoa, so that basically brings up the conflict. They don't want Franklin to go over. Basically, the X-Men show up so they can kind of kidnap Franklin because they know that Franklin's powers are waning and his father essentially doesn't or is hesitant to heal him back up because he doesn't know what'll happen, I guess.
Yeah, there's. I mean, this is part of the only story that gets. I mean, the premise gets a little bit off. So, I mean, I think they're trying to tell a little bit of a story that Reed is, naturally cautious. That he is
overprotective. I think is
yeah, overprotective is right. And I also think there's an element here of Reed is suspicious of what's going on in Krakoa. I mean, he mentioned of you guys are taking very aggressive steps. That doesn't end well as a scientist, as somebody who's been through this. That doesn't make sense. And I think that Zdarsky is trying to reference the fact that Franklin Richards is going through a stage in his life. He is growing up, which is an important thing. We've had this character in the Marvel universe for like 40 years now, and we've seen of all the people in Marvel, this is one person we've seen grow up as a baby to a young adult. And so I think Zdarsky is trying to do something important and clever with the Fantastic Four. Say, let's put a little emphasis on the fact that Franklin is growing up. What does this mean to his relationship with his parents, his powers, everything? Let's put some effort toward this character as a core Marvel person. So I think that's a little bit the story. Reed letting go and where's Franklin's place in the world? His powers are waning, but what exactly is going on with him? And then how that all fits into Krakoa and just his general place with mutants. Trying to once and for all sort out, is he a mutant or is he a superhero? And kind of, not that those two are mutually exclusive, but there's two different worlds that have lived here. And now more than ever with what they're doing with Dawn of X, the mutant world is a very different world from the rest of Heroes. And so which one does Franklin belong to?
And it felt like Zdarsky was kind of trying to paint both sides as having their own interest. It always felt to me like what Reed and Sue were doing was right when Reed blocks his X gene so he can't go through the portals of Krakoa. But when the X-Men show up, they essentially try to kidnap his son. It felt very evil. They felt like pure villains pretty much for the entirety of the story, except for a little part there at the end. But we'll talk about the thing that happens at the very end that essentially does it all back. But if he was trying to make the two sides seem like equally doing bad things, I don't think that worked out. It feels like the X-Men were way up more off base than the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. I mean, this idea of Reed was blocking his powers, and Charles is saying, well, you should be free to be who you are, and you shouldn't have that kind of interference. This where parenthood overprotective needs to settle back, but it reads a bit like somebody who does not have children and hasn't gone through the struggle of what you really...
teenager that could potentially create a galaxy or destroy a galaxy based on his hormonal, tidings sounds dangerous.
Sure. And I think Reed has a long history. I think Zdarsky gets the Fantastic Four very well of being, at times going too far or being overprotective or all the rest, letting his science kind of run amok with him. All that stuff is true. And he was playing into that. But at the same time, there's a parenthood element, a fatherhood element here of Reed and Sue are trying to protect their son, who still is their son and still is, growing and a young man getting his driver's license, so you can kind of peg his age there. But it is, they definitely kind of went, so the idea was that the X-Men would be able to tempt him into being something more. And this is kind of your freedom, your emancipation, so to speak, from your parents. And that doing so by kidnapping him and trying to rush him away, and then what happened at the ending, it's hard to look at the X-Men as anything other than kind of predators here for kids.
Kate Pryde essentially decides she's going to go back to the Seven Seas. Franklin Richards, Valeria Richards, they jump on the ship. They're stowaways. They end up on Doom's Island. And it felt like a weird use of Doom in this story. He almost felt more like a plot device than like a big part of the story. He was there to essentially get the Fantastic Four and the X-Men to kind of see eye to eye and understand that they're both trying to protect Franklin Richards. It was interesting. What I thought was most interesting was the relationship between Val in Doctor Doom, where she seems to like he's her friendly uncle.
Yeah, and there's always been that relationship, and I think that's something worth exploring. So first off, I agree with you. I think Doom didn't necessarily fit here. I think there's a couple of reasons they used him. First, for example, what you said, so that you could get a clear villain to kind of settle this and bring the two teams together, even though they ideologically are on different pages. And the other is, Doom was the main villain in the first series. So as a throwback to the first X-Men Fantastic Four, Doom was the villain. So you use him there again. I think the relationship with Valeria and Doom is an interesting one, and it goes back kind of a long ways. I forget now which writer first established this. Somebody in the comments will tell us, but I think that it is an interesting moment, and I think a lot of time should be spent with Valeria with very careful, smart hands, because she's a very interesting character.
She feels like she's on the path to the dark side.
Yes, she could easily tip there. She has this, strong moral code, but at the same time, just respect for Doom and this relationship with him. And it's, with good hands, this would be a fascinating development for the comic. And I would love to see somebody really explore and do something big with it, because it is a cool moment. Other writers in the past have done bits, but I don't have a lot of confidence in the current Fantastic Four writer to do that well, but we'll see.
So my issue, though, with the conflict is when you've got the X-Men trying to kidnap someone's son, you have Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four essentially trying to protect their side, and then apparently Doom is supposed to be the villain, but really they're all trespassing on his island. He gives them rules on why they can stay, and they break all of his rules, and it feels like he's not in the wrong here.
That seems to be what they do for the last, I'd say, 5 years of Doom stories, really since Mark Millar did his Doom epic story way back when he was writing Fantastic Four. That always seems like the case. Like, Doom seems like an arrogant dick, but at the same time, he is the ruler of a country. And every time Doom is going, hey, this is my territory, this is my rules, my set. And Hero's like, yeah, we get it, but we're coming in anyway. And it's like, it always feels like they want Doom to be the bad guy, but there is an arrogance in the heroes never respect that leader, and I mean
it's just Doom being Doom, and it's like he's protected his sovereignty here. You guys kind of dicked him around here
every time. I mean, this is in some ways it was fun reading that in the Zdarsky book, because it was a cliche. It is always what happens to Doom. So it is very much on brand for how Marvel treats that character. But I mean, Doom is evil. Doom is a bad guy. At the same time, when you go out of your way to say Doom is leading the people, there's always a couple shots of the Lavernians who are all happy that Doom's there, and I rule this peaceful country. And the hero's like, oh man, yeah, we can't do anything sneaky here. But what if we did, though, anyway? What if we kind of broke into his castle? It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of at the end, like I said, they kind of realize that they're fighting on the same side. They make up, and it's allowed that Franklin Richards can go through the portal and stay in Krakoa, but there's a portal right back to the Fantastic Four's compound in New York. And then obviously we do learn that Dr. Doom is aware of the threat that's on Krakoa. He's also strategizing how he's going to kind of defeat it. But then at the very end, there's another confrontation between Reed Richards and Magneto and Professor X. And it just reinforced everything that's felt wrong about the X-Men in Dawn of X. They came off in this scene as pure evil to me, because they said, Reed Richards, when you basically hid your son's X gene so he couldn't go through portals, you now have the ability to basically fix, heal, remove an X gene.
Yeah.
And that is a threat to Krakoa. So we are going to unilaterally, without your permission, we're going to erase your mind. And basically, so humans can't protect themselves from mutants.
Yeah, no, I'm not
to take, Reed Richards is a genius. To take his genius away from him, like, feels evil. It would be like taking Magneto's ability to work with metals away, or to, you know what I mean?
Sure. No, it's a violation for sure. And Charles has done bits before, and this is always seen as a really bad thing when Charles has done it. It's in the past, when he's tampered with people's minds, it's come back to haunt him. He's had deep regret or shame over doing it. And it's it's an ominous moment. So in one way, you put it this way: if you're trying to build an overall story with the X-Men in general, that they are on the wrong track, that they are moving down, that they have crossed the line from protecting their species into, you know, subtle outright war, which is kind of the overall story that Hickman is putting together, that they've been, you know, from Moira's reincarnations, that they've tried and tried and tried, but there is no peace that can be established. The humans always come for the mutants. So they're going to be more proactive. They're going to actually, you know, fight in essential. But you could see, you know, Magneto, you could see Eric doing this. It fits him, his, you know, at all costs. But to see Charles kind of come in and wipe Reed, it's a very haunting scene with the little data sheet here and the plans kind of disappearing into nothing. It's powerful in what it does, but it's also hard to look at this and go, oh yeah, the X-Men are they're the good guys. They're doing the right thing. It still feels like we talked about more than a year ago. I feel it feels like they're not the true X-Men. They're being controlled in some way, or there's a, you know, this is not who they're supposed to be. This isn't heroic.
Absolutely. So that's my biggest takeaway after reading the series. You know, that, you know, we're doing this wrap up is the X-Men definitely don't feel like heroes in this. You know, the Fantastic Four may make some mistakes here and there, but they definitely felt heroic. You know, the reasons that they were doing what they were doing were for their children, and that's completely understandable. There's some interesting developments. You know, Franklin Richards' powers are still waning, but apparently they decrease differently on Krakoa. They're kind of studying him. Hopefully they don't get Franklin Richards up to full power, you know, and start using him as it sounds like they want to. But very well executed story that further reinforces my belief that the X-Men are absolutely villains.
Yeah, I mean, if the plot of Dawn of X or Sunset of X or wherever this goes next in this chapter is that the X-Men realize they have completely crossed the line and gone too far, then this will all make sense. But I'm curious how Marvel lands this, because they're not acting heroic. They're definitely push things to a bad limit. And this you know, in many ways, this 4-issue series, it did a great job of encapsulating that faster than a lot of the Dawn of X titles. You know, you get a really clear picture of kind of the where the X-Men are at and how they're going, and that's good. I think it really sets the stage nicely. I'm not thrilled with this stage that they've set, and I feel like it's going to take an incredibly talented set of writers to pull off the next act. I mean, how does the X-Men come back from this? You know, but we'll see.
I think it's an excellent miniseries. It's definitely a highly recommend for me. I think the art, for the most part, is really good. There's a few issues here and there. I think the story is well executed. Probably could have used Doom a little bit better, but overall, like, I highly recommend. This is something, if you didn't check it out, go get in the trades when you have an opportunity, and I think you're going to enjoy it.
It's a good series, and I recommend, if you haven't read the original from 1987, I believe, Fantastic Four, X-Men, go get that as well. That you can find it now in places in trade. I highly recommend both. It is a good book, despite everything that we've said here. There's a lot of things to think about, which in many ways is what makes a good comic book, if you're talking about it and thinking about it, as opposed to just putting it down and forgetting it.
Absolutely. And next week, right here on Thinking Critical, we will be wrapping up the Kill Lock with my buddy Nalo, talking about that wonderful IDW series. Hopefully you'll come tune in for that. Thank you, Perch, very much for joining me. And here in a few seconds, people are going to have an opportunity to subscribe to your channel, and I highly recommend that as well.
Well, thank you very much. It's great talking to you, and as always, and glad to chat comics.